Let's do this!
Hey, I'm Jacob.
And I'm Tyler.
And we are
Card
Collectors.
Today, we're going to be reviewing Puss in Boots, Perrault's Great Adventure on the NES. It came out in 1990.
It was developed by Shuei System, and it was published by Electrobrain, who also published Super Cars on the NES, Vortex for the Super Nintendo, and Star Soldier for the N64.
The main character, Perrault, is based off the cat from Charles Perrault's folktale, Puss in Boots. And the game's also based off of the 1976 anime Puss in Boots Travels Around the World. And it also has influence from Jules Verne's story Around the World in 80 Days.
The story of the game goes is that the evil pig Count Grumon orders Perrault to destroy a mouse that's in the castle. However, Perrault is friends with this mouse, so instead of destroying it, helps him escape. Frustrated by this, Count Grumon and Dr. Gary, an evil wolf scientist, forces Perrault to go on a journey around the world and through the past.
Perrault's goal is to find and defeat Count Grumon and Dr. Gary so he can use his time machine and return to the present. Now this task is made more treacherous because Count Grumon sends the Cat Kingdom's killers after him because he broke the Cat Kingdom law by helping a mouse. So first impressions of this game, looking at it, it's very colorful, cartoony. It's got a cute, happy cat on the cover with a sword. You know, you can see he's in a hot air balloon, and it really helps to show that tie-in with Jules Verne's Around the World in 80 Days. You can see him in different areas and different enemies, and it all just seems to be really fitting with that aspect of the game.
Puss in Boots is just a simple side-scrolling platforming action game where the main objective is just to get to the end of the stage.
In terms of graphics, this is a game that's very colorful, it's quite bright, but the quality of the graphics are very average at best. The animation on some aspects is shaky, like the intro riding the horse in. It's not very smooth. There are some aspects that are better than others. The buildings are okay, but like the map with the continents, they're just so turtable. It's just, you can't really tell what they're supposed to be. So overall, I mean, the graphics at best are very average.
Alright, for the audio, the way me and Tyler usually determine if it's good or not is if by the end of the game, if you're sick of the music, it's probably not very good. But for this case, each stage has its own audio track, so it always kept it entertaining while you're playing the game, and all the sound effects, they make sense. So for the NES era, this game is actually pretty good on the music side.
There's some good control features in this game, and there's some that just aren't very good. The good being that you can just pause and toggle between the weapon you would like, and that's all really simple and easy. The bad being that when you move very slowly. And if you want to jump, you jump very quickly. So the control is awkward, and there's a learning curve to it, but with some practice, it becomes manageable, and it becomes second nature to you. So the control definitely is not perfect, but it's okay.
The difficulty of this game is pretty easy. It's actually one of the easier games on the NES we found. It's one of those games that you give to a person who's not really familiar with the platforming genre or just aren't used to the NES. It's a simple, quick game, 15 minutes if you've been playing it for a little while. Each stage is pretty much the same as the first. They're all very easy. They don't really get harder at all. The only time the game even gets remotely hard is at the very end with the final bosses, which makes sense. The game gives you 3 lives and 3 continues. As soon as you lose all 3 continues, you begin at the beginning of the game.
As far as level variety goes, there's a lot of level variety, and then there's not really much at all. And I say that because there are 7 stages, and the first 6 are all side-scrollers, and then the 7th level being a maze. But in those first 6 levels, how they have that variety is that in some parts you're walking, in some parts you're driving a car, or you're on a boat, a submarine, flying a plane, or a hot air balloon. And that really helps change the pace of things, and it keeps things, not from being so dull, and it just makes it more entertaining.
Like I mentioned before, the objective of each stage is simply get to the end of it. Poro has 3 different weapons to help you along the way to fight the enemies. There's the gun, which just simply shoots forward. It seems to be the more common weapon to use. Then there's also bomb, which you lob at the enemies, so, similar to the way you throw the rocks in Friday the 13th. And there's also the boomerang, which kind of just shoots up at the higher up enemies. The only thing about the boomerang, though, is you cannot use it again after you've thrown it until it comes back to you. However, whether or not you want to call it a bug or a glitch or whatever, you can pause the game after it hits the enemy, and you can unpause it, and it's immediately back in your arsenal, so you can use it again. So that's pretty handy, especially on some of the bosses. There are also 4 different items that you can find out throughout the stages. There's the money pouch, which just gives you points. There's the boot, which temporarily makes you invincible. Then there's the hamburger, which heals your health completely. Then there's the most important one, which is the peril mob. It gives you 1 full extra life, which is really handy in some of the stages. There's one when you're flying in a biplane. It always seems like you miss the peril mark unless you know exactly where it is.
There are a wide range of enemies in this game, from barrels to pirate ships, bats, sharks, and all kinds of cats. And all these enemies fit the theme of their respective level. And many of these enemies only take 1 hit to destroy. But what's interesting is that most of these enemies die as soon as they touch you.
All the bosses vary in difficulty. The very first boss that you come up against is the Mecha Frog. The easiest tactic that we found is simply going up to his face and throwing bombs in it as soon as he opens up his mouth. And, of course, dodging the little frogs that are spewing from him. The second boss is a UFO. You won't really even feel like it's a boss because he's very easy. You just shoot and dodge, shoot and dodge. Third boss is a demon god. He's more intimidating than he is hard. You just throw the boomerang at his face, dodge, throw the boomerang again. And this is where you can use that glitch we mentioned before, where you pause and unpause so you can get the boomerang immediately back in the arsenal to use again. The final boss, or should I say bosses, is Dr. Gary and Count Rumon. The tactic here is simply hope that you get a good hand. As soon as you enter the dungeon, immediately go to the rightmost of the screen and start shooting to the left at Dr. Gary. Do not worry about Count Grumon because he cannot affect you right now. Dodge the bullets as much as you possibly can. This is where the luck comes into play. If Dr. Gary touches you, that's immediate death. As soon as you kill Dr. Gary, Count Grumon comes into play and you can attack him. Just keep shooting on him, he dies pretty quickly. And finally, you're at the end of the game.
So final thoughts on Puss in Boots. I wouldn't say it's a great game, but it's not a terrible game either.
No, definitely not. It's more for novice users, or like I mentioned, beginners to the NES platform.
Yeah, it would be a great way to introduce a younger child to the NES and
exactly.
Give them a game where they feel like they have some success at.
Exactly. So if they do game over, it's so easy to get back to where they were. Mm-hmm. So it's definitely a game to kind of introduce them into it. But more regular users probably will think it's way too easy and kid-like, which because it is.
Right, no, that's fair. But I feel there's no major flaws with this game except for the fact that there's time travel. And to the best of my knowledge, the reason why that happened was in the Japanese version, there was no mention of time travel whatsoever. And it was a direct port over here to the US. However, in the manual, they decided to add the time travel element to it, which makes no sense to me.
No, not at all.
But, I mean, and one strange thing is at the end, giving it up to Lady Liberty was pretty awkward.
We don't need to talk.
No, but so just
stick around for the waiting card after the credits to see what we rated this game.
Yeah, see how it stacks up. So I'm Tyler.
And I'm Jacob.
And we're
Car Collectors.
Bye.
Bye.